Hello and welcome back to the 11th annual Bold Strokes Book Festival, which is this year the Bookathon UK, which is very exciting. And we're on to our next panel. Remember that we've got panels the rest of the afternoon and tomorrow with lots of amazing authors. So go over to the Bold Strokes website and get registered. And with that, we'll pass it over to Crin.
Hello. Lovely to see people again on the panel, and hopefully lots of people out there, some of whom we'll have met, some of whom we won't. Who would have thought a year ago that we'd be in this situation with the 11th Bold Strokes Books UK Festival? But aren't we fortunate that we can still meet up and get together in this way? This is making the unreal real, beyond the world we know. We'd love your questions. You can type specific questions into the Q&A box, which you should find at the bottom of your screen on the right, Q&A. And you can also use the chat roll to make any comments that you want to share. I'm Crin Claxton, creator of Unreal Worlds and a fantasy writer. That doesn't mean that I think I write books, but I don't. It means that I write books where vampires really do exist and where people not only talk to ghosts, but help them solve crime. And why not? Ghosts are people too, at least they are in my books. I'm talking today to 5 creators of real, unreal characters, creatures and worlds. Panelists, can you kindly raise your hand when I say your name? We have Darry. We have Ileandra Young. We've got Brey Willows. We've got Felice Picano. And will we have Robyn Nix?
Yes, she'll be here shortly. She's having a little bit of a tech issue.
Okay, and we'll have Robyn Nix very soon. The panelists are now going to tell you a brief summary of the book that they're going to be referencing on this panel. So Eden, could you please kick off? Hey, this is Robyn Nix, just joined us. So Eden, could you tell us about Vanished?
Yeah, so I don't have a copy of the book because we've moved and I don't know where they are, they're all in boxes, but that's... Vanished is basically, the premise is that 2 main characters wake up one morning after a storm and everyone in the world, it seems, has disappeared. There's some sort of creepy goings on in the town they're from, and they quickly realise that they have to get to higher ground as quickly as possible because another storm's coming. At the same time, there is sort of a fanatical woman who has been building, she calls it an ark for years, sort of in preparation for like a end of the world type situation. And also a young girl who is sort of the saviour of mankind, I guess, if you like. The evil woman, she's after her, and so my 2 main characters are also tasked with trying to save her as well. So I've got a couple of baddies in it, and yeah, it's basically just about their journey to try and survive.
Sounds fantastic. Robyn, would you like to give us would you like to give us a summary of Uncharted?
Sure. My kind of one-liner, jokingly, is it's Lara Croft with bigger biceps and smaller boobs. So it's an archaeological romp in the Amazon with 2 main characters, Chase and Rain, and they used to work together and now they don't because Rain double-crossed Chase in Florida on a treasure ship one time some years ago, and basically Rain's come to Chase because a nefarious character wants Rain to do something rather questionable even for Rain, so she goes to Chase for help, and begrudgingly Chase agrees to work with her, and then the rest of the adventure is in the Amazon chasing down the famous Golden Trinity.
Which we'll wait for more information about that coming up. Ileandra, moon fever. What's that all about then?
Oh, okay. Right, the second one. I haven't got the cover for that. I do. It's out soon. Right, Moon Fever picks up straight after Both Ways, which is the first book in this series. It's following Danica Carson, who is still a member of the Supernatural Prohibition, Extermination and Arrest Regiment, which is Spear. But in this one, the werewolves in the city have been... Well, there's something strange going on with the werewolves. Nobody knows quite what. There seems to be a new pack around, but there shouldn't be because battle season hasn't started yet, and the strange powers surrounding new packs isn't active. And this new pack is getting its numbers from existing packs and changing humans when they shouldn't be. And Danica, as a spear, is tasked to find out what's happening with these werewolves and also rescue her friend who has been framed for unlawful lupine infection, i.e. changing humans into werewolves when they don't really want to be. It's all very organized. You see the relationships between supernatural creatures and humans, but if a supernatural creature breaks the law, Spear steps in to help out, or to, to sort them out. Maybe not help them out. Depends what they've done. But there we are. It's a short version.
Thank you. Great. All these books are, of course, available, and there'll be a link coming up later for the flash sale throughout this event. Brey, could you tell us about Changing Course?
Yes, I have my book here. So that's Changing Course, and that's my first sci-fi novel. I usually stick to fantasy or dystopian, but it was lots of fun to write. And it's about Endymion, which is a kind of a rough and ready planet, and a ship's captain who crashes onto Endymion, and she's quite buttoned up, and she's from somewhere where they don't show emotion or have inequality or anything like that. And it's up to Kylan, who lives on this rough and ready planet, to show Jessa the way and have lots of adventures along their journey together.
Brilliant. Felice, you've got two books that you're referencing in this panel. One isn't enough for you, obviously. We just can't get enough of your books. Would you summarize those, please?
Well, I'll show you one, because I love the cover, 12 O'Clock Tales. And the second one, which is what I'm going to talk about right now, and this is a collection of strange stories that I've done over the years. The second one is called 20th Century Unlimited, and it's two short novels in both of which somebody time travels within the 20th century, right? So that's where the name came from. And the first one, an elderly man who feels he hasn't done enough in his life, has taken to walking up to the top of his hill in Los Angeles to get exercise. He meets a dog and a man, and the man tells him that he was born in 2160 and he's come back in time. And he suggests to our narrator that he can do the same thing. And the time machine in this event is a mattress with some electrical currents running into the wall sockets. And he actually travels back to exactly where he is in the Hollywood Hills, 1935. He arrives at night and he finds himself younger because he's lost all these years. So he actually ends up being an 18-year-old in 1935 Hollywood. So that's one. The second one is about, it's called Inglesby, and it's about a certain estate in the Midwest based on one of the Frank Lloyd Wright estates, famous architectural place. And a young man who's still a graduate student in history is hired to take care of the property while they get it ready to open as a museum. And while he's there, he discovers that he's in a tesseract. And a tesseract is a place where other times appear. And he has no idea what's going on. And he forms a series of relationships with the young people from 1939 who are there in the Tesseract.
Thank you. We're going to go on to some individual questions now to authors, and I'm going to start with Eden. Your book Vanished is set on Earth. Would we recognise the planet? What's different about it?
Everyone's gone. There's nobody left. Yeah, what was that?
More.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much sort of like an Earth of today, so there's nothing necessarily different in it. But like I say, because obviously everybody disappears, so you're left with this sort of ghost planet, really. So everything is still there, cars, houses, stuff like that, but just all the people have disappeared. So yeah, I'd say that's probably how it's different. But other than that, it's very much the same.
Are all the animals and birds and creatures still here? Is it just humans?
Yeah, just humans that have gone, and animals play a bit of a role actually in the book. I won't go into it, but yeah. So it's literally just human beings that have vanished.
So what things came up when you were building that world? Like, how do your characters get around? How do they buy stuff, get supplies?
From that, it was actually quite funny because obviously the UK isn't a particularly big country, and so the issue I had was like if all the cars worked, people, like within a couple of hours or whatever, they could be most places in the UK. So I think it's going to be quite a short book. So I had to kind of find a way of basically making it so that there was nothing that had to just go on foot. So I'd kind of written into it that nothing worked. Either to try and find a way. I guess in terms of how they get things, they're like breaking into shops and stuff, and I guess there's sort of like that thing where you think, well, if no one's around and you could just go shopping and you wouldn't have to pay for anything, you take what you want. So they just break into places to get the things that they need.
How do you build the tension if there's very few people around?
So I tried to counteract it, but it's got quite a big kind of cast of characters in it. There's quite a few POVs, points of view, and I kept switching back between them because I wanted to kind of create like this sense of sort of speed. They were running out of time. They had to do this within a certain time period. So I sort of tried to switch between the characters, and also, like I said, because there's nobody around, it's very much about the characters by themselves trying to get to where they need to go. So yeah, there's I think about 1, 2, 3, 4, about four points of view in it.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you very much. You've whet our appetites to read more. Going on to Uncharted, archaeology is a lot of fumbling about in the dirt with a blunt tool and a little brush. Robyn Nix, did you have to dig deep when you researched the locations and myths for Uncharted?
Yeah, absolutely. I did a lot of research, and I was lucky enough to have a reader who's Jeanette Murray. I believe she's somewhere in the audience there, and she's actually a real life archaeologist. So once I'd written it, I sent it to her to just check that it was realistic in terms of how things work and how archaeologists kind of interact with each other and interact with the world around them. In terms of the actual adventure, because there's 2 mini adventures that lead you into the characters. One of those takes place in Syria amidst the backdrop of ISIS, an ISIS attack. And then the other one is under the catacombs in Paris. But then the big adventure in the Amazon is the main part of that is Mayan culture, Mayan technology, and their history. So I did a lot of research around the codex, around the glyphs that they use, to the extent where the logograms, so the little weird kind of drawings that they used as language, I researched it so deeply that I could actually tell a joke within the logograms that only Chase and Rain would understand, which was fabulous. So, and I did a lot of research in terms of the Amazon and the rainforest, because with this I really wanted to concentrate on the setting and make sure that the setting came alive, so that the reader, while they were progressing on the adventure and going from sort of clue to clue, they were still grounded in the Amazon. So they got a sense of the oppression of the jungle, but then the beauty of the jungle as well, and the creatures there, and the humidity, all of the things that go along with traipsing through a jungle, so that you wouldn't get part way into the story and think, oh, where am I? Or this could be, you know, on the streets of New York or something. So they really had a sense of the Amazon jungle as a character, because part of what I was getting across within this as well was the obliteration of the Amazon jungle and kind of the political side of that. So I really wanted people to understand where they were. So I did a lot of research around the Amazon jungle, and I had maps and drawings and all sorts of. I had lots of fun making the journey real, from the side, you know, sort of the wide rivers that you see down to the little tributaries, and making sure that they had the right boats, and then going on foot and all that sort of thing. So it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I'm looking over here because I've got, this is one of the books, like the research books that I had, that I sort of, you know, found out about how the logograms worked, so that
Wow.
Chase and Rain have access to a map that was found deep in the bark of a tree, and it had grown over itself basically. But as it was being chopped down, it was discovered. So I had to make sure that I had in my head the map and how that worked, and how the language was constructed at that time, in circles, or whether it was in columns, depending on who it was made for, who it was aimed at, and how easy it was to read, because they actually did that. I believe, I mean, it's been a while since I wrote it, but I think it was the language was written circular if it was kind of aimed at the higher classes, but in columns if it was aimed at kind of everyday regular people. So yeah, I had a lot of fun researching that book.
It's interesting, a lot of stuff you've touched on there, Robyn. Many readers, well, some readers might not be aware of how much research writers do, or some writers do for some books.
Yeah.
It's not just a sort of all sitting at the computer or writing the words, it's sort of getting the information to write them. Did you go to any locations yourself in the book?
No, well, I mean, I've been to San Francisco and New York, and I haven't been to Syria, and I haven't been to the Amazon, and I haven't been to Paris. It was in the plans to go to Paris and the catacombs before I wrote the book, but it just didn't happen, unfortunately. But normally we do tend to, because obviously the Wi-Fi's over there in the corner, Brey, we do tend to go off on research trips at the drop of a hat, which is nice, which is kind of why we don't have kids and kittens and any animals or whatsoever, so that we can be writing a story and suddenly think, I need to be there. And that happened a couple of years ago when I was writing Escape in Time, and that's set in Nazi Germany, and there's Ravensbrück, the female-only concentration camp, and I got to that section and I thought, I can't do this justice without going. So 2 days later we were on a plane to Berlin for a couple of days, so that was good. But unfortunately we didn't get to go to the Amazon on this occasion.
Oh, thank you, Robyn. More about Uncharted later. Vampires and werewolves are hugely attractive fantasy creatures, or are they, Ileandra Young? Are your creatures attractive? How do you make your vamps and wolves real?
It's by their nature they are fantastical creatures, so you've automatically got your work cut out for you. So I make them real, for me anyway, by making them people by reminding myself that underneath whatever they happen to be, they are people. And it's a bit easier with these creatures because they used to be people. Some of my werewolves might have been born as werewolves, but the majority of them have been turned, you know, as they've gone about their lives. So they used to be human beings. So everything that they once, everything that they once were, I don't know what they're doing now. Yeah, everything that they once were, they still are, with extra bits on top. And I kind of find the difference between those with vampires in particular. This is part of why Danica has a very strong vendetta against vampires. I found the covers, by the way. There you go, there's one. That's both ways. Love this. And I found Moon Fever, that's the new one. Isn't it pretty? Anyway, yeah, because vampires, they maintain little traces of what they used to be, but what they become is a monster, effectively, a monster that has to drink blood to survive, which is horrific if you think about it. It's possible to do it without killing people. And in the city they live in, the city I created, Anbeck, it is perfectly possible for them to do that. They have the supernatural registry, which actually enables all supernatural creatures to be logged by the system so everybody knows what they are. It's almost like having a national insurance number. And they have the lifeblood serum. So any blood that's donated for hospitals is tested. And if it can't be used for humans, it's used for vampires instead. So there's all these different things that they have in place to kind of make vampires less of a threat, but they are still a threat. And there's kind of that running underneath all of it. It's kind of like trying to tame a cat. I mean, we've domesticated cats, but it hasn't been very long that cats have been pets, you know, unlike dogs, which we've been breeding for years and years and years. Cats, not so much. And you just need to look at a cat to know it's a wild creature that would eat you if you died, perhaps. And vampires are just the same. Whoa, it's true.
I'm really interested in some of the conventions that and institutions that you're talking about that you've created for your world.
Yeah.
How much of the conventions around vampires and werewolves have you kept? Is blood-sucking socially acceptable? Is it frowned on if you carry a silver bullet? Yeah. How does it work?
I kept a lot of the like traditional stuff, and some of that I kind of went, no, I don't want that. So these vampires, they can't walk by day. You know, sun comes up, they die effectively. Sun goes down, they come back to life. So they are dead creatures. They don't really breathe. They don't really have pulses, but that's stuff that they can generate within themselves if they want to. And as they grow older, the need for blood is less because they've lived for so long and they can appear more human than they are. But the older ones, their eyes change color. You know, their eyes change to purple, deep, deep purple. So you can see instantly that this is an old creature. With werewolves, there are so many different tropes and conventions around werewolves. So I kind of just picked the ones I liked. And that's kind of how I do this kind of, because there's so many variations and there's so much folklore, especially related to vampires, that I kind of thought, well, that's not going to work if I want to tell a story. This might work if I want to tell a story. There's other books I've written where the sun doesn't bother vampires at all, for instance, and their history, if you like, starts in ancient Egypt. With these ones, I haven't gone back quite that far, but I've kept with the traditional, no, they don't like the sunlight. Crosses hasn't come up that much, but they don't like them. Holy water, you know, holy wafers, that kind of thing. Anything to do with a faith will still harm a vampire. And werewolves as well. Silver, they don't like it, but because this is my world and it's not too distant future, I decided to play about with it a bit. So Spear have weaponized some of these things. So they have like bandoliers full of little capsules of holy water, or they have silver bullets, or they have wood. Well, they have a whole range of bullets. They have silver, wood, and lead, you know, depending on what they're going to be dealing with. Same with handcuffs, for instance, silver ones for werewolves, special reinforced lead ones for vampires and anything else you can get your hands on because they're very strong, lead for any kind of fae. So I kind of just play about with it and pick out the things that I like that I can be consistent with. It's kind of how I've done it. Really. It's a bit cheaty, but I'm allowed to. I'm a writer, I can do what I like. Aha.
Well, I think that is one of the joys of being writing in the fantasy or sci-fi genre, that you're not just making a story, you can make every single thing up. And I could talk to you for hours about this, Ileandra, but I'd like to move on. Some people don't stop at creating myths and creatures, they have to go and create whole worlds. I'm talking to you, Brey Willows. Where on earth did you begin when you were creating the planet Endymion?
Actually, Gunbrook and I kind of started talking about this morning on our chat. We both start with topography, and in the way that the planet itself is built, and then expand outward. I was very lucky that changing course, kind of elements of it came to me in a dream. So that helped immensely because I could see it right when I woke up. And I had the concept of the conflict already ready to go when I woke up, which was very cool. So because I already had the characters and I had an idea of the planet, I was able to sit down and just start thinking, okay, if this character lives here, why does she live there? And one of the things, and I don't know if I'd seen the movie because I have a really, really horrific memory, but if you've seen Ready Player One, he lives in like stacks where they look like shipping containers, basically just stacked on top of each other. And that was what was kind of in my dream. And so I started playing with that. And then I thought, so if this ship's captain crash lands on this planet, how is it different from what she knows? And I kind of had to start there and then play with that difference and start creating people. And I think one of my favorites is the flying people. And when I was putting them together, you know, flying squirrels, how they leap from tree to tree and they have that like flap of skin. I thought, wouldn't that be cool? Like, like if we had this giant flap of skin and we could just jump off the roof and whee to work. So that was fun to play with. And like, what is a society of people who can do that, who can fly from tree to tree look like? So it was just a lot of fun to play with the different places and come up with entirely different places. But I think the one thing that remains consistent is sadly social inequality and how that Gunbrook has just commented, I want to be a flying squirrel. Me too, Gun. And you're gonna leave here and picture everybody as a flying squirrel. So it was then the social inequality too, and so you build these places and you think, now how does their society work, and how is that society different from this society over here? And as I take my two characters through, how does that change them and what does it make them see? So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's really drawn me in, as you've drawn me in a lot actually to the world, just with that little snapshot of it. But what occurred to me as well, as you were talking about the flying people, is that actually science fiction goes to science fact, you know, in more than one occasion. From the minds of artistic creators in all mediums can come real stuff. So you never know, Brey. We may actually, your book could be, you know, prompt somebody to design a suit that humans can wear. that will enable them to do just that, so.
Well, and I think they have, haven't they? I don't know what they're called, but you can jump off a building and like
those big
do that and whee!
Yeah.
But but I'd like it to be attached. I don't want to have to get dressed in it and zip it, and I just want to go.
Base jumping.
Thank you, and we'll probably be hearing a little bit more about that later. Felice, both 12 O'Clock Tales and 20th Century Unlimited feature time travelling. So what rules did you create to make time travelling believable for yourself and also for the reader?
Well, in the first book, in which the older man goes back in time to 1935 Hollywood, there really aren't any rules. The one rule is that he retains who he is in his mind, but he has a younger body. And the younger body is constrained by the time that he's living in. So when he arrives, he still looks quite young. He goes into a sort of boarding house. He goes with the other fellows from the boarding house to do part-time work in the Hollywood studios. They all go in buses to the studios where they will be in mass scenes. And he's sort of kidnapped by these two people and dragged over to MGM to go into teenage movies, right? Because he's a kid, So even though he has the knowledge of that time from being a grown-up, he still has to deal with what it's like being a young person, right? And so the young person stuff is he's dealing with other young people who he hasn't dealt with in many, many years. In the other novella, it's a tesseract, and the time, he goes in and out of time. And it takes him a while to discover what's actually happening. And then when he discovers it, he's got to try to solve two big questions. One is that he's a straight man who's fallen in love with a woman who is his age in 1939. So what does he do about that? And number two, there's a gay man there who does not know he's gay, because it's really not an issue in 1930. In 1939, it's not an issue because there's no such thing as gay. There are people who have homosexual feelings, but this young man, very personable, attractive young man, has no idea what's going on, whereas a contemporary young man can look at him and say, your problem is you're into guys, and there's a way to solve that. So they do actually he solves both of those problems. His main problem is that the summer that he's met these young people is the summer in which that building is going to burn up, and it's going to be destroyed, and they're going to die inside it. So he wants to solve, that's the biggest problem he has to solve. And so he manages to solve several of the problems.
So you've created some very knowing characters who are also alien to the worlds in some way or other. What was the benefits to you in the story of having this knowingness that your central characters are aware of things that everybody around them aren't?
Well, the benefit is that they can do things. So, for example, the young man in 1935, he and his friends go to a breakfast diner every day. And one day the chef doesn't show up. And everybody says, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And he says, we can make breakfast. Let's go into the kitchen. The idea that young men would make breakfast for themselves and others in 1935 was unknown completely. Nobody even thought that a man could do anything in the kitchen unless he was a professional chef. So I played a lot with what people know, what they don't know, and how they can utilize it. And one of the most important things was I came out to Hollywood to work. I was bi-coastal for a while, but I came out in 1977, if you can believe it, as a young man. And I met a lot of I was out then, and I met a lot of people who discovered me and would tell me all of their gay stories. And this included men and women, and then later on a bunch of mostly straight women who call themselves the brassy old dames of Hollywood and who were famous stars. I would accompany them to Oscar ceremonies and things, and everyone would tell me stories about going back to the 30s and what gay life was like. And that was important for me to know, because I couldn't write the book unless I knew there was gay life in 1935 in Hollywood, and that my young men would find it. So at the same time I was doing that, I had to ask myself, well, what did it look like? How different was it than it's been in my lifetime? And luckily, a whole bunch of photos by Ansel Adams that he had done for the WPA, FDR's work program for artists for 4 years. These became available through the family, which donated to the LA Public Library. And so I could see what Los Angeles looked like during those years. Names had changed, places had changed. Private airports in Hollywood had been torn down, but they were still streets named Aerodrome Drive. A Cadillac factory had been taken down for a housing project, but it was still Cadillac Lane that led to it. Where CBS television studios are was a baseball stadium. So I learned all of this, and it made it more real to me. And then, of course, there were the streetcars. So it made it all more real to me, and thus more real to the reader.
Yeah, I think you've hit on something very important there, Felice, that if we have to make things real in order to write things real.
Right.
So we've got to believe them ourselves and research them. There's the common theme on this panel is that even on fantasy and sci-fi writing, there's an awful lot of research going on behind the scenes to create our own versions of either conventional things or to create completely new environments. Going to move on. Thank you, everybody. Going to move on to some audience questions now. And Kerry, hi. Kerry McNair asks, hi all, how do you develop your plot and characters? So if I throw that one at you, Eden, because we haven't heard from you for a while.
Interestingly enough, the first two books I wrote for Bold Strokes, I did do like quite a really detailed outline and plan, and so like down to which like to planning each scene. And then on the one I'm currently writing, which was not going to be out till next year now, I've just decided to start writing it and see what happens. So that's quite a new experience for me, but it's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we could probably take that question to Robyn next as well. Do you want me to repeat it, or?
No, it's about plot and character, isn't it, and how you develop them. Yeah, so because the person that taught me how to write is just on the screen there, in terms of that kind of structure and what is good to do. I do a strong outline. Sometimes I'll storyboard it out. I'd love to storyboard it out physically, or artistically, like Missouri, like Paige Braddock, but I can't. So it just has to be boxes that are storyboarded, but just filled out, so a scene by scene thing. And then my character development to do in-depth character studies, because I think it's important to really make your characters 4-dimensional and know exactly what they're going to say in in any given situation, how they're going to react, how they're going to interact with the people around them, how they're going to interact with situations that happen to them, and what they do to cause situations. And all of those things are wrapped up in how you grow up as a person, the influences you've had, your family life, your education, all of these things influence all of those things, how you act as an adult. So I really try to get inside the skin and inside the head of every character that I'm writing, particularly my main two point of views, my main two characters, so that I'm answering as those characters when I'm writing. Yeah, so that's about how I do it.
Thank you, Robyn and Eden. Moving on to another question, which I think has got Ileandra's name all over it, from Lara Hart. Thank you, Lara. I had an Irish friend who went ballistic against a fanfic that was roughly about fae folk. She was adamant it was cultural appropriation. Do the writers think that writing certain supernatural memes like vampires or specific shape shifters, quite, you threw me a right tongue twister there, Lara, outside their own background might be cultural appropriation?
Right. That's tough, but I don't feel it is. People always say, write what you know, which is great, but what I know at the moment is mostly sitting at this desk and listening to them two yell about Minecraft, and that's boring, okay? I very specifically want to write about stuff I don't know or stuff that I've made up. And I think, for me anyway, if I'm telling a story, I'm telling a story. I have a set of events that I want to talk about, or I have a message I want to give. I don't normally realize what my message is until I'm finished, which is quite weird, but there often is one. And I think confining myself to just Black history, for instance, would be wrong, because it doesn't give me any opportunity to learn anything. If I write about only what I know, then it's only what I know. And I feel that's a really boring way to write books. I want to learn about other cultures and mythology and customs and habits, and I can't do that if I'm only writing about my own. And insofar as fantasy goes, I mean, and one of the reasons why I always pick fantasy is because, to my mind, it's universal. That it doesn't belong to any one culture or people or person. It's something that everybody can find something in. Sure, fae folk, yes, there's tons and tons of lore and stories and mythology related to Ireland, but as a writer, I want to play with that. And if I'm not allowed to touch on it at all because I'm not Irish, then that's a whole sandbox I don't get to play in. And I think that's the disservice to me as a writer who wants to play about with things, and to readers who might be interested in how I interpret something, you know? So no, I don't feel that it is. I feel that you need to be careful and cognizant of how people may feel and be respectful, but I don't feel that a writer should completely cut themselves off from writing about a certain thing for fear of cultural appropriation. No, I don't.
Thank you. Brey, do you have any thoughts on that question?
Yes. I agree completely with Ileandra, and I love how you said about the sandbox. Like, why would you relegate yourself to this one tiny sandbox? I think that was a fantastic way to put it. And I agree, you have to be careful about how you do it. You have to be respectful, and you have to do your research. And you make sure not to perpetuate the stereotypes. But for instance, in Spinning Tales, which was my fairy tale that came out just before my last book, I dealt with fairy tales from all over the world. And as far as the fae, like Ileandra was saying, there are fae in many cultures, and
That's right. True.
to say, yeah, I mean, there's vampires in many cultures, so to say that they only belong to one is silly. There are versions of these creatures and myths and tales all over the world. So I agree that it's about playing with them and enjoying them and helping other people learn about them too. I loved learning about some of the Nigerian tales that I've put in there that were fascinating, and some of the African mythologies that were fabulous to learn about. And hopefully I did it well enough to kind of get other readers to imagine them, which I think fairy tales are very much about imagining a world that is ours but not ours. So I think it's important that we play with them and enjoy them and learn about them and share them.
Thank you, Brey. I agree with both of you, and just to chip in a second, because I think that the whole thing about any kind of what could be cultural appropriation is to come from utmost respect, and with liking the myth or the story that you are incorporating within your writing, so that you're coming from a positive angle and you're as informed as you can possibly be, because cultural appropriation is a very frustrating, it's a very real and frustrating thing for people to experience. And just wanted to make that point quickly on the panel. We've just got time for one more audience question, which will go to everybody on the panel, starting with Felice. And it's from an attendee who is anonymous. For all authors, if we haven't read your work, what book should we start with? Felice, could you kick that off, please?
Luckily enough, Bold Strokes Press publishes a variety of my books, but I would recommend for mystery thriller like people who like that, a book called The Lure, famous book. If you like supernatural, a book called, well, either of the books that we discussed today, or another one called Looking Glass Lives, which is set in a historical period also. And if you are interested in supernatural, also that book, or in these two time travel stories.
Thank you. Ileandra?
To unmute my mic there. This is really easy because I only have the two. Haha. So both ways. Start with that one. Start with this one. It's awesome. I love it. You will too. Yeah. And then that one, obviously, because you can't have that one and then not read what happens next. Okay? Start with that one.
Thank you, Ileandra. Eden?
The first book about is a house, and that's a ghost story about a family who are sort of escaping from sort of quite a nasty event, and they sort of move to this house and it's haunted. So that's quite a good one to start. And then also Vanished, which I've already talked about, and then there's another one coming out in October called Z-Town, which is about zombies. So yeah.
Thank you. And Robyn?
I've written books across quite a few genres. So if you like a thriller, then Never Enough is a great one. If you like sci-fi or spec fic, my Escape in Time Extractor series trilogy, starting with Escape in Time. If you like pure romance, Music City Dreamers. And if you like adventure, then I'd go with Uncharted. So I can't say one particular one because it depends what people like. But within all of those, there is a romance central to the plot as well.
Okay, and Brey?
Yeah, similar to Robyn, I genre jumped a little bit. Oh, okay, it's going to be a long weekend. So I started out with fantasy, and that's my trilogy, which deals with the Greek, with the Greek Furies, and deals with religion and philosophy and really strong women who can eat your brain. Then there's the fairy tale. So if you like fairy tales, Spinning Tales was my fairy tale. I've written Chosen, which is a dystopian novel about climate change, a little bit of an adventure survival kind of thing. And then my latest was a pure sci-fi, which was Changing Course. So it like Robyn said, it kind of depends on what genre you like.
Thank you. All right, so there's plenty of options for people there, but unfortunately we now have to wrap up so that everybody can get ready for the next exciting panel, which is coming up very soon. Meantime, do check out the BSB Bookathon sale on selected e-titles. Just follow the link. Thank you to all the fabulous authors on the panel. Ileandra Young,
Crin,
Felice, Picano, Brey, Willows, Robyn Nix, and Darry. Coming up next, and me, Crin Claxton. Coming up is Just Around the Bend, where Brey, Willows, and Ileandra are back, and they'll be discussing writing series with 4 other fabulous BSB authors. Audience viewers, thank you for coming and supporting this, and hopefully enjoying the panel. It's been an absolute pleasure. Until the next time, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.